Hello! Welcome to my quarter two reading wrap up. We did this last month for the very first time. I will link that up above. I hope you've had a great first 6 months of the year. I certainly have, and I have gotten a lot of reading done. Not as much as I normally do. I've been in a reading slump for quarter two, but I still got some reading done, so let's talk about it today. I read 18 books in the months of April, May, and June. So let's get into a little bit of some details about those months. In April, I read 7 books, a total of 2,505 pages. I read all fiction, and I read 4 audiobooks, 1 digital book, and 2 print books. My average rating was 4.21 stars. And I'll preface all this with saying I am an exceptionally high rater, and I also DNF books if I don't think I'm going to like them, so generally my scores are quite high. Month of May. We also read 7 books in the month of May. We read, this time, a lot less in terms of pages. I guess the books must have been shorter. I read 1,898 pages in the month of May. And I read 3 nonfiction, 4 fiction books. Total in terms of format, I read 6 audiobooks and 1 print book, and then my average rating was 4.46. And in June, which has been a wonderful month by the way, I read 4 books. This was a really bad reading slump month. I was playing a lot of video games. The Switch 2 came out at the beginning of this month, and I restarted my Animal Crossing Island, and I have been playing that non-stop. But I think I'm going to switch my language to Spanish for Animal Crossing so I can play it in Spanish and see if that makes it a more productive habit. Anyways, back to June. I read 4 books, 1,284 pages, our lowest yet, 1 nonfiction, 3 fiction books, 1 audiobook, 2 digital books, 1 print book, and my average rating was 4.75 stars. With the numbers out of the way, let's get into it. Ba-da-da-da! Our first book in the month of April was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Oh my gosh, reading this feels like a lifetime ago. We have lived through so much since then. But I have to say, this is the best Hunger Games book yet. It is all I thought about for a month straight. I literally, like, the password on my computer is different now because of this. But I can't tell you how much I just adored Hamich's character development in this. I thought that Collins did a beautiful job with him showing, like, his highs, his lows, and how he got to where he became, who he became. So if you haven't read it yet, which I imagine you have if you're watching this video, give it a read. Especially if you have read the Hunger Games series, so good, so good. Next, I read The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. This is about 4 siblings who go to a psychic in 1960s New York City, and they find out the date they're going to die. And it follows the 4 siblings in terms of like where their lives go based on what day they're going to die and the decisions that they make. It was a super interesting premise. I really enjoyed the character development as well. It was fascinating. Overall, I gave The Immortalists 3 stars, and I think I would revise that to 4 now that I've sat with it for a little longer. Press of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This was my first Brandon Sanderson book, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I listened to an audiobook that was like completely performed. All of the characters had their own actors. There was music, there was like sound effects. It takes place on a boat for most of it, so there's like ocean sounds. It was really lovely. If you get a chance to listen to it, I really recommend it. Brandon Sanderson, I had never read from before, and I was a little nervous because I know he's known to have quite intense fantasies, but this was a very accessible fantasy, and it's about this girl who is on the hunt across an ocean to find her lost love, who is like the prince of her kingdom. So she's doing the hunting for her partner rather than the man doing it, which I love. But the magic system was super cool. There's like, I read it so long ago that I can't remember what everything was called, but there was like a way that the atoms in the matter of the world worked that made it really cool. I think what were they called? Hold on. The spores. They called them spores. It was super cool. If you haven't given Brandon Sanderson a try because you've been nervous about it, that was me, and I have to say, this was really good. It was well worth the read. And I gave that a 4 stars. Next, I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I'm going to tell you straight up, this one was just fine. It is like one of the OG cozy fantasy books that came out a few years ago that like started off this whole onslaught of cozy fantasies that everyone's been reading lately. So it's about an orc who leaves her life of adventure and murder, and she goes on to start a coffee shop in this town, and there's all kinds of like little socio-political things happening, and it's really interesting. But I have to say, this was just fine. I'm glad I read it. Everyone's been talking about it for ages, and I wanted to read it. It's one of my mom's favorite books. I think because she's so into Dungeons and Dragons. It was a little meandering to me. I don't know. Let me know what you thought if you've read it. Twice Shy is about a woman who leaves her dead-end job and tries to refurbish her like somewhat estranged great aunt's house after she dies, but she's got to do it with somebody because in the will it's left to somebody else. It's left to both of them, and so she slowly but surely falls in love with this guy who has been her the great aunt's caretaker for the last several years before she passes. And this is the most anxious man alive meets a pathological people pleaser. It is an absolutely lovely love story. Next, I read Don't Want You Like a Best Friend by Emma R. Alban. This was an incredible sapphic Regency era, like Bridgerton meets Parent Trap situation. And I gave this a 3.75 stars just because at some points it dragged, but this is the kind of book that I can honestly see myself writing. So that says it in itself. Next, I read Funny Story by Emily Henry. This has major, if you've watched New Girl, it has major Nick and Jess vibes. There's a bartender and a children's librarian. They fall in love. They fall in love after becoming like roommates after their respective fiancés cheat on them with each other. So it's a super like twisted tale, but I really love Emily Henry's way of creating a story that has a genuine like heart and soul in it. There's like a beating heart in every story she tells, and I so appreciate that. Right, getting into May. May was a crazy month for me at work, but I did get a decent amount of reading done. First, I read Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. This was a tolerably good romance novel. It was about two teachers, and they become neighbors, and they're enemies to lovers, and they're both writers. There was a lot going on, to be honest. And it didn't hit quite the way that her last book did. Her last book was also set in Rome, Kentucky, the same place that this book is set in. It's part of a series, a trilogy, I believe, with 3 sisters, and they're each having their own love stories happen. The characters had problems they had to work through, but it almost seemed like the problems didn't fit the characters. Like, it felt forced. And that's honestly the word I would use for a lot of the latter part of the novel. After the real banter had kind of dried up, it was just really forced and like, I don't know, not great. Next, I read Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next by Dean Spade. This was a super speedy audiobook. It was like 4 hours tops, and I listened to things on double speed, so it was 2.5 hours. And I honestly feel like I didn't get a lot out of it because of that. Normally I do, but I think for nonfiction I need to slow down and really sit with it. And for nonfiction I need to read it physically. because I do a lot of highlighting. And I feel like this is something best physically read and really absorbed in a way that I didn't feel like I could get from an audiobook. So if that helps you at all. Next, I read The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown. This was read for my workbook club. It was a very detailed exploration of the University of Washington rowing team and their quest to compete in the 1936 Summer Olympics. There's also a movie that came out recently, which I tried to watch, but I couldn't get through, and I also heard from my book lovers that it was bad, so take with that what you will. Next, I read Any Trope But You by Victoria Lavine, and you guys know, I love romance novels. I love romance novelists, but this did not work for me. This is basically about this romance writer who is exposed as hating love, and so she goes on this retreat to Alaska, presumably to write her next novel, which is going to be a murder mystery. And she accidentally falls in love with the guy who lives there, who works on the resort, the retreat, I think. So she falls for the guy who works in the retreat. They both have direct family members who are dealing with major illness, chronic illness and disability. And I thought that was going to be interesting, but it seemed like the female main character and the male main character were both being deified for being carers for ill family members. But they seemed to be doing like things that the family members didn't really want. I don't know. Weird vibe. Not a huge fan. Let me know if you've read it, if you liked it, because I was so sold on it. And the cover is super cute, as you can see. So let me know if you read it, if you like it or not. I don't know. It wasn't the vibe for me. Next, I listened to Two Can Play, Allie Hazelwood. This is a short audiobook exclusive, which I adored. Allie Hazelwood just knocks it out of the park every time. I'm so excited for her new stuff that's coming out. I recommend this one specifically to everyone I meet IRL. The romance isn't my fave of hers. That belongs to Deep End. But I love that it's video game developers, because narrative craftsmen, if you will, because I love video games. And so it was really cool to see that perspective. Next, I listened to The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family by Jessalyn Cook. This was such a sad exploration of QAnon's impact on American families. It followed several families, and it just talked about the way that their like parents or sisters or like siblings or anything, like how people are affected by this, and the way that it kind of eats away at your connection when somebody gets sucked into a cult like that. It was honestly really sad. So much so that I cried a couple times while listening to it. But I think it's important to see, like, to get a good look at, like, the reality of what's going on in the United States. If you're a United States person, like, I mean, I don't know. It was really heavy, but it was worth it, I think. Next and finally for the month of May, I listened to My Husband by Maud Ventura. This was a recommendation from Allison Pages, who no longer posts. I love and miss her every day. But the book was an excellent psychological thriller with a wild twist at the end. Basically, it's about this woman who's obsessed with her husband, and she just spends like every second of her day like refining everything she does to make it perfectly palatable for her husband. And the twist at the end, I was like, no way. All right, we're hitting June. June is gonna be super fast because I only read 4 books in the month of June. I was playing a lot of video games, so we will see if we can do better in July. But first book that we read in the month of June was Hamnet, a novel of the plague by Maggie O'Farrell. This is about Shakespeare's family, but it's told about specifically his wife, Anne Hathaway, who's named Agnes in this book. And because this is historical fiction and because it's about historical events that happened so long ago, a lot of this is kind of up in the air as to whether it really happened. It's not as firmly based in historical fact as most historical fiction books are, but it is so good. I know, I'm super late to this party. I know everyone read this when it came out in 2020. I think it came out in 2020. Hold on. Yeah, it came out in 2020. A very auspicious year for the Plague novel to come out. But some parts, I'll be honest with you, were very hard to read. Especially the bits where Hamnet, spoiler alert, died. And the exploration of grief was so tender and real. I just really, I almost cried several times. It was very intense. So especially if you've lost someone recently, I don't know if I would recommend this book to you. Huge trigger warning for grief and the loss of a loved one. Next, I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This was a reread for me, and this time I listened to the audiobook, and it was a game changer. There were accents and pauses that added suspense, and I gave it a 5 stars this time around. I think I gave it a 4 stars last time. I listened with my grandma. It was a lovely experience, and it was just a thriller. It's a thriller about a woman who kills her husband and then goes silent. She doesn't speak another word, ever. And it's about the psychotherapist who goes on to treat her in this, London psychiatry unit called The Grove. If you haven't read The Silent Patient yet, very much recommend. I haven't read any of Michaelides' other works yet, but I probably will give The Fury a try. It sounds good. So we'll see. Next, I read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This was a 6-star book for me, which I don't think ever said. The characters, it's about, if you haven't heard about it, it's about a woman, a chemist, who she ends up on a TV show about cooking, and she charms the nation with her blunt, straightforward way of speaking and the way that she really believes in women as a species. The main character's name is Elizabeth Zott, and she was so charming and lifelike. I really felt like she breathed the same air that I did. And I know I'm so late to reading this, but if you haven't read it yet, this is probably my biggest recommendation from this whole video. Love. Everything about this, so good. I want to watch the show now. Finally, in quarter 2, I read One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. It made me stagger. It's basically about Palestine, Western liberals, journalism, and what it was like for the author to move from the Arab world to the West. It made me stagger under the world's political reality, and it's a New York Times bestseller, and it's so beautifully written. The prose is just gorgeous, and is genuinely breathtaking at times. He opens every chapter with a description of a event that happens in Palestine, and the way that terrible things that are happening there. And it was the kind of book that made you have to really sit with being uncomfortable, which I really appreciated, and I will recommend this to my family and people that I know. All right, that wraps us up for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it. And comment, subscribe. I'm planning on doing a lot more videos in the next couple of months, especially language learning vlogs. So if you're into that, hit me up. I'd love to study with you. Thank you so much for watching. Comment, subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!